Today we're going to talk about hair color. We're going to do quite a few videos because I want to break this up into little snacks rather than let's have a whole smorgasbord buffet of education and your minds are exploding. It's one of my favorite things to teach because I feel like if you just study your chapter and go through it and build on your foundation that you've probably already had in an art class, color is predictable, and I'll talk about that a little bit more as I get into the color wheel in the next video. Today we're just going to go over the foundation of hair color, what it means, and some factors when it comes to the hair that we need to consider. Not things that we're going to discuss with our client, because most clients aren't going to know how light or dark their hair is. They're going to say things to you like, oh, my hair always is warm, or I see red, or I see yellow, and their perception of what our reality is as we're moving into this professionally is quite different. So you're not gonna sit them down in your chair and say like, okay, what's your texture? What's your porosity? Because they're gonna look at you like you're crazy. But I need to consider those things in order to end up in the right place. Oh, I'm gonna take this off because it's gonna be bugging me, friends. Okay. So, hair color, one word, not two, just the one, is what we refer to as introducing artificial hair color to the existing hair. So, put that up here. We're gonna get right into it. Hair structure, we go over this all of the time, but it is going to contribute differently based on the service that we're performing that day. So you guys know layers of the hair. We started with this at the very beginning, so hopefully we're already familiarized with cuticle, cortex, medulla. If you're not, we got a problem. Let's go back there. I'm gonna be drawing pictures and like adding to the board as I go, so hopefully that's helpful to you guys because I see things better when it's visually mapped out. So, no judgment on my drawing, by the way. That's the rule, friends. So if this is your hair, she's looking cute. You have three layers essentially. So your external layer, or your protective covering or shield, that is going to contribute shine to the hair, is called your cuticle, right, friends? Okay. When it comes to hair color, we are going to be either introducing color to the outside, or we're developing, well, I don't want to say developing, that's the wrong adjective. We're going to be introducing color into the inside layer of the hair, which is the cortex. Okay. This is where your hair's color or pigment is found. So when I say pigment, I want you guys to start understanding like pigment, color. Okay. And lastly, you have your medulla, which is going to be the pith or the core of your hair, and it just contributes structurally and density-wise. Really, really fine hair doesn't even have a medulla. So when it comes to hair color, it's irrelevant, I would say. So the main ones that you guys want to grasp onto are these, your cuticle and your cortex, because that's what we're going to be dealing with when we're introducing that artificial color to the hair, okay? And I will get into that also. So texture plays a role because it's the way that the pigment of the hair is going to be grouped into the structure of the hair itself. So fine hair, one thing we want to know about it, it processes faster, and the melanin or pigment is grouped more tightly. So I like to think of it, I don't know if you guys played night games growing up. We're in Utah, so this is a thing. But when you all hide together and you cram into a little space, that's kind of how your color molecules are in fine hair. You're all sardined in really tight. So just two things to bear in mind. Fine hair is going to process faster. So that means when we are timing our hair color, it's going to be shorter, less time, all right? When we're lightening it, which we're going to do a completely different video on lighteners, I want you guys to like stay in the lane of we're just focusing on putting color into the hair rather than taking it out. But when you lighten, it's gonna go faster also. One thing we know about fine hair too is that sometimes the color looks darker because there's less space for it to occupy. So as that pigment goes into the hair and it's grouped more tightly, it can appear darker. So I say can because it's not always the case, but in some instances, if we contrast it next to coarse hair, that church is true. Okay. Average hair is going to behave in an average, predictable way. So this means as we allow our hair color to sit and to process, it's going to take that just middle ground. So if you have a processing time that's between 30 and 45 minutes, your average would be right in the middle. So fine hair would be on the 30 side, where your average would be that 35, okay? So I'm gonna just arrow this down. It's predictable. And it processes in an average way. I hope the squeaking of my marker isn't driving you guys nuts. It's kind of one of those noises I'm like, oh, super aware of. Okay, coarse hair, your pigment is grouped more loosely. So if we go back to that hair structure, okay, if we have a fine hair and he's and then you have a coarse hair. Coarse hair has more layers of cuticle. This is significant because when we get to types of hair color, I'm going to talk to you guys about why that plays such a factor and why we have to let coarse hair process for longer, because it's not going to act the same. So if my color is going into fine hair, and these are my little pigment molecules that I'm drawing, guys, I know. Looks so legit. They're grouped nice and tight, close together. Whereas in coarse hair, I can have the same amount of pigment molecules, but they've got more real estate. So because of that and the way that the color disperses, I have to allow longer time for it to do its thing and what it needs to do, okay? Moving on. Let's talk about density. This isn't going to factor in too much. It's something we consider in our consultation, mainly because you need to know how long it's going to take you to get through that head of hair, how much color to mix, and sometimes in different zones of the head, I'm going to be timing differently or using different developers. That's going to be more relevant as we talk about lightening the hair. So I don't want to delve into that too much, but just know that that will factor into your application time. And also how much product you're going to be using, which is something we want to be really transparent about in the consultation. Not all heads of hair are created equal. So if we have someone that has a ponytail like this, as opposed to a ponytail like this requires more product. So as a stylist, I need to charge for what I'm using on the client's head. And if you have that discussion at the beginning of the service rather than at the end, you're like, and it's going to be $70 for your all over color. And they're like, what the junk? You need to lead with that. So it's nice and clear. Our clients don't like surprises. So sometimes there is that variable that you don't know how far you're going to get in it, but you can mostly ballpark and give them a legitimate range of what the cost is going to be. And then they can decide, okay, I'm on board with this, or no, I'm going to be a little more frugal and I don't necessarily want to spend that today. That's better than having an upset client that doesn't want to spend that much money. Okay, so how much product are we using? I know I'm in the way of this, but I will move. How much product? Okay, let's talk about porosity. Do you guys remember what porosity is? It is your hair's ability to expand and retain water. So taking on water or moisture and how well it's going to hold that moisture. So some of you are aware of this as you get out of the shower and your hair stays wet for hours. Like the inside back here, you're like, oh my gosh, it's never drying. That's because that hair has low porosity. So that means the cuticle, that outside layer that we talked about, structure, is tight, it's closed down. So healthy hair has low porosity. When it comes to hair color though, we want to have something average that's more conducive to us getting where we want to be quicker. But healthy hair looks better and it's stronger. So absolutely, we're always going for that goal of healthy, shiny hair. But you need to know when the cuticle's tight. I like to think of it as a child that's refusing to take its medicine. Like it's like, so it's stubborn and resistant. That's a good word. So it's fighting us a little bit. So what that means to you is you might have to use stronger developer, and you might have to let it sit a little bit longer, okay? So low porosity, you get that hair wet, it stays water off a duck's back, essentially, but it's healthy. So we like that. The cuticle's closed. The hair feels nice and slippery and smooth to the touch. But what we want to know as a stylist mainly is it's going to be in the resistant category. And we also group, I'm gonna squirrel in tangent for a minute. We group gray hair into the resistant category. That's not always necessarily the case, but I think when we think of resistant, we start to go stubborn. Oh shoot, this is gonna be a pain. That's not necessarily true, but just know the healthier the hair, or if they've never colored their hair and they barely touch it or do anything to it, we're gonna have a little bit more of a fight than average. So average always behaves in an average way. It's predictable, we're good. I'm not gonna write that down because I think you guys can figure it out. High porosity means that that cuticle is raised. So coming back to the hair structure, as that hair, if this is the top of it, grows out of your head, this section is usually a lot more healthy. It's fresh, it's grown out of the head, it hasn't aged and been exposed to as much as your ends, especially on longer heads of hair. So if they have fine hair and they lighten it and they heat style on the regular, they're not using good product, or they're just really hard on their hair, that cuticle tends to raise, okay? So some of the visual, physical signs that you guys are going to see during the consultation, you'll feel the ends and they'll feel a little bit more rough. Coming back to that, fresh out of the shower when your hair stays wet or not, the porous area of your hair will not hold water. So you'll find that, well, I know this is true for me because I have fine hair and then I'm like, let's balayage it, so that means bleach. It's more porous, so that's dry, and then my healthy hair up here towards the scalp, it takes forever because I have a ton. So I need to take that into consideration with my hair coloring process and know that this is going to be more stubborn and resistant and take longer time, where my ends, that cuticle is already wide open, so it will lighten fast, but it'll also take on color if I'm trying to drive it into the cortex quickly, okay? So something to consider. We'll circle back to this when we go over color formulation. If it's not clicking right now, it will. Okay. So high porosity means that the hair is going to be more fragile and process faster. So it may appear damaged. You guys can also do a porosity test on several areas of the head. I don't know how many of you have done this before, but if they don't have too much natural texture or wave pattern, their hair's pretty smooth, or they flat ironed it, if you ruffle it up from the ends, okay, this is, I'm putting it out there, guys. Okay, so let's look at my hair. I'm coming in, little buddies. So it's all ruffly here, but then I have an area that's nice and smooth and shut down. So about half of my hair, that cuticle is slightly raised. That's what makes it ruffle up on itself. So if I know my hair's porosity, I'm going to know what type of hair color I should use for that zone or that area of my head. Because we don't always go in and do the same bowl of color over everything. Actually, that's pretty rare. Sometimes as a stylist, we'll be using 2 to 3 bowls of color. And that's something that you guys are going to learn. So you'll get good, consistent color applications and everything will be even and balanced. Okay, let's talk about types of melanin. You have eumelanin and pheomelanin. So when I say the word melanin, do you remember what that means? Pigment. Okay, and pigment means what, friends? Color, which is what we're talking about today. If you're still with me, are you with me? Are we still awake? I took a class where the educator would ask us that all the time. Are you with me? Just like I say, and I was like, we're with you. I was with you 2 minutes ago when you asked. But anyway, okay, we're talking about color. Eumelanin, pheomelanin, or mixed melanin, which I didn't write down, but now I feel like it's relevant, so I'm gonna add mixed. Okay, so eumelanin is your darker hair colors. So browns, black, okay. Darker hair tones. So everyone is going to fall into these categories, every head of hair that's out there. Then you have your pheomelanin, I mean with the exception of albinism, but that's the exception, not the rule. So the rule is this. Pheomelanin is going to be your red to blonde tones. Red, blonde, ginger snaps, pheomelanin. The way I remember that one, and it's cheesy, but this is gonna help you. So, Princess Fiona, who's seen Shrek, if you haven't, what's wrong with your childhood? I judged you, I did. She has red hair. So Princess Fiona sounds like pheomelanin, red and blondes. So if you can differentiate there and at least get half of it, I feel like we're pretty solid. Your mixed melanin is going to be a combination of the two. You will see this in some heads of hair, but what I mostly see it is in men's facial hair. So you'll have a guy that's brunette, but then he has some reddish, ruddy, or gingery tones to his facial hair. So that would be an example of mixed, where both of these are present. And that's about it. So this applies more when we talk about lightening. As we want to get the hair lighter, eumelanin is more difficult. Pheomelanin tends to behave a little bit more. And that ties into your level, which I'm going to talk about in just a sec. How we doing? How we feeling? So far, so good? Brains aren't exploding? All right. Contributing pigment is another thing that you guys are going to consider professionally and not talk to your guest about. But it's the things that we know, it's that mental checklist that we go through when we're first getting introduced to that client's hair that help us determine what we're doing that day. I'll probably bring this up again when I talk about formulation, so if I do, that's okay. But when I think about hair color, it's like turning on your location on your maps. You have to know your starting point to know how you're going to direct yourself and navigate through the service so you can end up at that final destination and where you want to be. So if we don't know that and we don't go through this process, it's really difficult for us. Anytime we're guessing when it comes to hairdressing, we're leaving too many variables to it, and that doesn't guarantee results. But that's why I mentioned at the beginning of this, hair color, as you study it, as you get familiarized, as you jump in, it is predictable. So if you take the time to know your stuff, you can pretty much relax and take a deep breath and not feel like you're praying back in the color room like, oh, please help this to turn out, because you've gone through it and you should be able to know what you're going to get. But remember to turn on your location. What are you doing today? Where are we going? We have to know that. Okay. So contributing pigment is going to be the undertone of the client's hair. This comes back to what I mentioned earlier, when your client's like, my hair always goes red. Like, yeah, everybody's hair has warmth. And that comes down to what we're going to talk about when we do color theory with the color wheel. Because everybody's hair, you don't have to do that much, is made up of these three colors. Okay, you guys might be familiar with them from when you were a toddler. So, yellow, blue, and red. So when our client has that eumelanin, darker hair, their predominant undertone is going to be red. So no joke, once you put lightener on the hair, you will see a little bit of this. Everybody's hair is different. So as you guys start to do new clients, you're gonna be like, oh gosh, her hair lifts super warm. Or maybe she starts a little bit lighter to begin with. Like her hair is super yellow, like outside of banana, I like to call it duckling yellow. No one likes to walk around with this. Like, that looks really bad. So we want to know, okay, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to see red. I'm going to see copper tones, which when you mix red and yellow, it makes orange. Yeah, we learned this stuff. So you guys know color theory. You've been rooted in it for a long, long time. But professionally, we need to apply that knowledge and go like, yeah, client, I hear you. Your hair is going to go red as I lighten it. Absolutely. So we factor in that undertone, the warmth exposed during color or lightening. So in a color sense, if they've never colored their hair before, I can use permanent color to take their hair and make it lighter. That's true, okay? But someone who hasn't ever put color on their hair is kind of like a unicorn that you're trying to date. You're like, oh, it's a mythical creature, I've heard of it. So every once in a while we get that awesome client in our chair and we're like, oh, you have unicorn hair, and it's so exciting. But once you color it, it's colored. It's color treated hair, so we can't treat it that way anymore. And our capacity to lighten the hair with hair color becomes obsolete. We can't do it, okay? So I will probably say this quite a few times. Sorry if it gets redundant. Color does not lift color. So color will not lighten color. If I have colored my client a dark brown and she decides she wants to go a little more medium, lighter brown, I can't mix up a bowl of light brown color, put it on her previously colored dark brown hair, and have what I think is going to happen if I'm uneducated, okay? So a good stylist knows, okay, lightener's my only option. And that's where our clients start to get sweaty and they're like, I don't want you to bleach my hair, bleach is bad. Okay, but it's necessary. Bleach is a tool. So once they've made that commitment and they've decided I'm going to color my hair, we have to put it into a different category, okay? So hopefully that made sense. If you guys have questions, you can always comment, email that to us, and we'll circle back. But in the next few videos, more of this is going to make sense and start to click. One thing I always like to challenge you guys to do, and it comes back to, like, we're in Utah, so if someone is watching this and hasn't been raised in Utah or religiously for that matter, I feel like your color chapter should be like your scripture study, okay? If you never crack that book and you don't take the time to read it and reread it, you're not going to know that. So every time we get into that chapter, at first we're just scratching the surface and you guys aren't gonna have a lot of retention. So color might elude you for quite a bit. But every time you read that chapter, you're going to build on that foundation. And so more is going to start clicking and you'll say like, oh, I didn't catch that the first time. Kind of like if you guys have read scriptures, I don't know. So you get out of it what you want to find. And even as educators, we still go over our textbook and we read our chapter before we teach it and present it, so we make sure that everything's fresh in our minds and we go like, oh yeah, that's useful information. Or things I like to think about when I was a student, I'm like, I didn't understand this whatsoever, and this is where my stumbling blocks or my roadblocks were. I remember that and I can empathize and go like, okay, this is what I wish I knew when I was starting out. So as I go through lessons, I'm gonna try and give you guys a little bit of that. Things Krista wishes she knew back in the day when she was young hairdresser Krista. Yeah, I would have avoided some situations. I haven't had big time disasters, so to speak, but anytime when we're learning, you guys will have successes, and that's awesome when your color turns out and your client's looking in the mirror and they get that look. I mean, you do have the people with like no expression, RBF, and you're like, do you like your hair? And they're like, I love it. You're like, I don't really know. But other people, they get this look, they get this smile when they're checking themselves out in the mirror and they're running their fingers through and they're just like, you're like, girl. So in those instances, I mean, I'm still going to give her that question and say like, how do you like your hair? But I can already tell because her body language and her face and her smile or his smile is telling me everything I need to know and that I nailed it. So that's so cool as a stylist. But I think we all tend to be really critical of our work and our art. Hair feels like art. And so you guys will learn more from those moments where you screw up. But as much as that feels defeating and you might cry at the end of the day and go like, oh, why did I choose to be a hairdresser? It's so hard. We've all felt that way. There's been days where we're like, maybe I should have been a dental hygienist. But you'll learn, okay, I'm never gonna do that again. And so those, those failures are going to be just, well, more so significant than all the times when you do it right. But it is fun to pat yourself on the back and be like, yep, nailed it today. Okay, let's talk about level. I'm going to get into this in formulation more, but this is the lightness or darkness of a color. So there are 10 levels. 1 through 10, all right, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. You guys are getting the idea, so I'm not gonna keep counting, all right? The lighter the color, the lighter, what am I trying to say? The greater the number. So I kind of liken this to floors in a building. If you're on the ground level or the main level, there's not as much natural light as when you get up to the top of that building. So down here, this is where black hair color lives. It's the darkest at 1, and 10 is going to be your lightest blonde. And I will talk about this again. But hopefully for today's sake, all other hair color falls in between. You guys need to grasp onto that because these are things that we're turning our location on so we know where we're going. You don't ask your client what their level is. They don't know what you're talking about. You better know. And then we have tone. Tone is going to be that contributing warmth, neutrality, neutral in the middle. So it's half and half warmth or cool, or coolness. So warm colors tend to look lighter and brighter. Do I need to write that down? I think you guys are good because I'm going to circle back to this when we do the color wheel. Neutral's right in the middle. So natural hair color tends to fall in a neutral range unless they're a ginger or like really goldeny. Neutral. In contrast to previously colored hair, your clients will come in when their roots are showing. By the way, your roots do not show. They are in your scalp. Your new growth shows. But your clients will say that, oh, I need my roots done. And you'll be like, honey, I got you. But their natural hair color tends to look drab compared to that hair color, that pigment that we've introduced to the hair for a few reasons. But just know if they're going for a more natural look and they're brown, that's where you want to be. With gray coverage, we create a base with neutral colors. I'll circle back to that more. Cool colors tend to look darker and bring more depth. Coming back to our primary colors, I will talk about this again, but the predominant base color is going to be blue. So as we introduce blue to a color formulation, this is going to show up as ash, gray, or blue in the tube of color. That's going to bring depth and darkness. So you need to consider with your client what they like. Do they want their hair to be warm? Do they want it more natural looking? Do they want it to be cool? Is it already warm, so I need to cool it down so it looks more neutral? Some people like cool hair, but that doesn't occur naturally in hair colors. So as we've been through trends of platinum, iced out, ashy blondes, things like this, that doesn't occur. So if you guys think about your hair when you were a child and you'd play in the sun and it would lighten out, that's warm, right? You get copper golden tones. So those tend to be flattering to our clients, but you have that client that's like, I see red, and they don't want to. So for that red seeing client, that's their perception. We aren't here to argue. She hates that. That doesn't make her feel like her most beautiful self or his beautiful self. I don't mean to gender categorize here. So I know as a professional, as an expert, okay, I'm gonna cool her hair down. I'm gonna ash it out. So I'm gonna add a blue-gray base or a gray base, and that's going to do what I need it to do. Okay, thanks for coming to my color lecture, guys. We'll see you soon.